I'm Mel Stewart, and this is the SwimSwam podcast. Joining me today is an Olympic champion, a mover and a shaker, a power player in swimming, the CEO and founder of Swimmingly, Charlie Houchin.
Oh, let's do it.
I just want to say that you really stepped up your game. You got your backdrop, you got your mic. It's impressive. I'm feeling some mic envy. I think your mic looks a little better.
Well, I just saw your setup, and so it was monkey see, monkey do. I had to do better.
I know. I'm feeling a little bit competitive right now. At the outset, we said this the first time we talked to you. You and I are 4x200 freestyle Olympic brothers. Many, many moons ago, when you were a child and you were just, sitting there wanting to be an Olympian, I was on the podium for Team USA. Of course, we won bronze and you won gold, so that makes you better. Today, we're going to talk. I want to catch up a little bit. If there's any changes in swim tech, I want to get into your little backstory a little bit more. And then today, we're really going to get into questions that you should ask national team members. And I really appreciate Charlie coming on, because I think that he's the white hat man, the good guy, the sweet guy. He's a man of faith. He's a good man. Maybe me, not so much. So
well, I'm only white hat today because I'm actually wearing a white hat. So you guys can be the judges for yourselves.
Fair enough. At the outset, you did found Swimmingly, and that's one of the most exciting, swim tech businesses in swim. Is there anything changing right now, because we have a changing landscape with the pandemic? Anything? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, in kind of the swimming industry. Hello, we were talking to all of those people right now. I don't think we've ever seen in recent memory something hit the sport of swimming so dramatically. And in parallel, I don't think we're unique and novel in that sense. Obviously, it's happening all over the place. But what we are seeing is people who are thinking differently, not necessarily because they want to, but because they have to. And so we're there to help them along. But the shift is, we have seen, there's simply no competitions for parts of the country right now. For other parts, it's limited. For everywhere, it's different. And we see people looking for a blueprint of, how do we navigate this? As a company, we're trying to help, and we're trying to do what we can to be a part of that, just to be a guiding light for people to, at the very least, say, here's a blueprint for how you might go about your competitions between now and the end of the calendar year, as an example. But Mel, I've never seen anything like this in the sport, where people are having to, as Brad Pitt says in Moneyball, when he fires the guy, he said, "Adapt or die." And I think this is our moment as a sport where we're seeing that.
As you're talking, I just popped over to your website, swimmingly.app, swimmingly.app.
That's it.
And I know you guys, you have the ability to run virtual meets. And that's and talking with the USOPC, talking with USA Swimming, talking with national governing bodies across the world, they're the questions are, can we run meets, and can we social distance, and what is that going to look like? Because the pandemic we're seeing the numbers go up in the United States right now, like the trailing 14 days going up now. So the question is, do you have meets in Southern Cal, Arizona, Florida? Okay, that's great, but that doesn't cover everybody. The bulk of our registration domestically, the United States, or in Europe, cold climates. So what do you guys offer that can make this happen for teams?
Yeah, at the end of the day, support, and conversation with anyone. And we are doing that now, and we're doing that more than we have in years past with various LSCs. But our job, our opportunity with folks to best serve them really, really happens once there is some sort of competition that's possible, which doesn't preclude us and doesn't preclude us from having the conversations before then, because when that is safe to do isn't always self-evident. Sometimes they're looking for, is there a rule? Is there something saying we can't do this? Is there some common sense or some good, restrictions or guidelines in place locally that say we shouldn't do this, or we can do this, or we could do this based on X, Y, and Z? and we're helping them to navigate that so that participation can, one, continue, get back in the water, and two, increase ultimately. And we're learning a lot from the teams that are willing to take those steps. And the cool thing that we've learned in just the last probably 30 days alone is the teams that can participate now and are willing to do so, really are kind of pioneering what's going on, because they're doing it in kind of the safest way possible. They know they're sort of the first in the door here on the other side of this thing. And so in some sense, they're sort of going above and beyond what the requirements are. They're adding those additional layers of protection, making sure that timers are spaced far enough apart, making sure that there can be the parents on the pool deck for maybe that particular heat and the next heat. And then they have this sort of carousel. We've heard teams kind of explaining this, the protocol they have to get the parents on the pool deck to be able to observe, and then getting them off the pool deck for the next wave. But then we have a lot of teams where there haven't been any parents on the pool deck as well. And so this is not an opportunity for us to really talk about the product or anything. It's really just an opportunity for us as a business in the sport to be a sounding board for them, so that they can bounce ideas off us, so we can share that with other teams.
If you're not aware of this, Houchin's an Olympic champion. He, as Olympic champions do, they earn money, and he used his revenue from his Olympic winnings to launch Swimmingly.app. And Swimmingly is, this is cool tech. You can run your swim meet virtually. You can run it from your phone. I think this is something that's cool, because if you're a team or you're doing an inter squad and you need you're not gonna have pads. You're just like, let's just do this. This is something that you can use, and it's effective, and it keeps you engaged, and it makes it exciting. I know you're not in sales mode, but I do think that's something that people need to be aware of. So if you're listening to this, pop over to swimmingly.app and check it out. I want to talk to you about your career. And
All right.
Here's the thing. The first question is, really, you're a mid-distance guy. And the obvious question is, do you hate sprinters?
Well, we all do, because we want to be them, right? I mean, that's it. If I could do the practices that they got to do, who wouldn't want to? Of course, we love to hate them.
I'm beating a dead horse here. Everybody's giving me crap about it, but it's I do have, everyone knows there's tension there. But you're a legit mid-distance guy. You drop down, you drop a 348. You almost made the Olympic team in the 400 free. Were you, at what point were you dropping miles? Were you at 800 meter man?
I did the 800 and the mile up to maybe my first professional year. Like, times. The times will date me too, because everyone just gets faster, but like 7:55. And honestly, I don't even remember my best mile. I was at the 1200 meter mark. Swimmers, if you're out there listening, you know what I'm talking about. That was when Charlie started to check out of the mile and started thinking about the 200, maybe the next day, or the 400 coming up. But I did those until I got really serious, maybe the year before, when I made world championships in 2011 in the 400. And that's when I really started to focus on 400, 200, and then threw in some hundreds just for fun.
400 meters is a sprint.
I think it's the most strategic race that there is. I think it's the most, it's like watching the horses run at the track. Like, there's so much relative strategy to it, and you're not necessarily focusing on the other guy. But if you look at the times, even across a single quad, and how much they can vary, it's really interesting. You'll have those where, Sun Yang and whoever else are going 342, but then the next year or the year before, they may have won the same thing with a 44 high or a 45. And I think my best was like a 46 something, but I never quite figured out that. And I think I learned in 2013 in the 200 how much I like to put the legs in overdrive too soon. So I think it may have had something to do with that.
It's 400 meters to me is one of the most exciting races to watch, especially at the highest level. And it's just, it's a lot of pain involved. It's if you're training for 400 meters, you're doing real honest work. There's no hiding, but there's no hiding in a 200-meter free.
Sure.
And the 200-meter free, so the two greatest events at U.S. Olympic trials, probably 100 free, 200 free, because there's so much drama going on there. Because you're watching 7 and 8, you're watching who gets sixth, you're looking at who's getting third and who gets second.
There's a lot on the line. Yeah.
It's like the iterations of what happens and all the narratives that play out are enormous. So just put us inside your head before the final of the Olympic trials in the 200-meter free.
Okay. Because
I'm assuming you're going, I got to beat 2 guys.
Yeah, that was part of the equation. I would normally look at, for like finals of a big race, I would look at the heat sheet and I would kind of just look at it once. And I wasn't a studier of it, leading up to it the day. I was in race mode. But I knew who the players were, right? Knew everyone, by name. I think I had trained with everyone personally at that point in the heat, except for Ryan. I think that's true. And I knew, relative to kind of all, it got to be top 6. I knew what I needed to do in executing my race, and thinking about that. I kind of had this confidence going into that, because I knew what I could do to execute, how that might affect me relative to the other athletes. And it got me fired up. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it was just kind of a brief moment, maybe as I was warming down for prelims, getting ready for the next one. And just kind of a brief moment where I knew that the ball was in my court, and if I swam my race, then it would be good.
It's a great race. It works. And it's, you had some real nitro. What were you? Were you 145 at the Olympics on your split?
At the Olympics, I went slower. I let off more. I made the mistake as a young whippersnapper that was looking forward to representing his country. I told Bob that I wanted to lead off in the morning. And initially, I think he had me going 3rd or 2nd or something, but I was all gung-ho to lead it off. And I don't know why.
Never lead off a relay at the Olympics. That's just a rule.
I don't know. So I went a couple seconds. I went like a second and a half slower. I mean, it wasn't great. I put my hand on the wall first by 1/100th in the leadoff, so that was fine. But
dude, you delivered. World champs in Rome, which was gorgeous. That was. I love that venue. Love the atmosphere. Love the feeling. You dropped to 145.5, and that is
Barcelona, 2013. Yeah.
2013 World Championships. That's right.
Yeah. And I'll speak to that. The swimmers, there's always unfinished business. There's always the next level. There's always the next standard you can qualify for. And when I got to the Olympics, I remember having this thought, which was probably not a good thing, walking out for the 4x200 in the morning. And that was sort of this realization in this split second that, like, this is it. Like, there is nothing to qualify for it. Like this, I have arrived in a nutshell, right? I probably shouldn't be thinking about that, but it was kind of this fleeting thought. And I was a little tense for it. But going back to that swimmer mentality, there's always the next step, always the next thing to take. It was really 2013 Worlds that I think I really figured out finally how to swim that race. So I went 3rd in the morning, and then I went 3rd at night again, and did split 45.5 both times. And was pretty proud of that step, in the year after the Olympics, and sort of figuring out how to execute, and really went back to my legs. I had to consciously think at Worlds in 2013. My only execution for the race, Mel, was when I dive in, I'm not going to kick until my feet hit the wall at the turn at the 50-meter mark. Like literally, don't kick. And don't kick for Charlie is like moderate kicking, right? So I was like, don't kick the first 50. Don't kick. My feet hit the wall, and I was like, all right, good. This will be good.
Are you one of these guys that were you somebody, you were all legs, or you hated pulling in practice? I was a kicker. I couldn't pull. Like in practice, and people put paddles on, I went to the end of the lane.
I listened to you and Christy Young the other day having this same discussion. I was totally legs. I loved kicking with him at Michigan. And I really had to learn how to swim with my whole body as a single machine instead of driving my body with my legs. I really struggled with that for a long time. In fact, I got to Michigan and I was still swimming with breathing every 3. So I'm trying to swim 200-meter freestyle races with Michael and, you know, whoever else, and I'm breathing every 3. I mean, I look like a 16-year-old age group swimmer because I basically still was. And I think I had got down to like 150 point in the 200-meter free, like breathing every 3. And Matt Patton used to make fun of me because I'd swim like this. And Bob finally was like, just pick a side and learn to swim correctly. So I did.
Yeah, your legs take up way too much. You're burning a lot of oxygen. You got to breathe. You got to breathe, and you got it doesn't work.
Yeah, people treat it as this necessary evil, the breathing thing. Like breathing is a beautiful part of the stroke, you know, at least in freestyle. I mean, it's not something that we just inevitably have to do. And so we got to figure it out. No, you got to make it a natural part of that rhythm and that cycle. And that's what I figured out finally by 2013.
I was always a little jealous of the teammates, our fellow Team USA members who got to go to Pan Ams. And you went to Pan Ams, you picked up 2 goals in 2011. Because if people that, you know, if you're not aware, USA Swimming, Canada, Australia, that, you know, we have the Pan Pacific Games. That it started as Pan Pacific Games. Now it's Pan Pacific Championships.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always the biggest television draw. There wasn't even they wouldn't have TV rights in the beginning, but the governing bodies had a better stake in it, so they had more revenue in it. But Pan American Games was always well covered, a lot of fanfare. So I never got to do it. So how was your experience in Mexico?
So this was cool because we had just come off 2011 Worlds in Shanghai. And that was my first, other than 2010 Pan Pacs, which was in Irvine. So it counts, but it wasn't like the crazy cool trip. Coming off this first thing from Shanghai, and you kind of have this lull because we're getting ready for trials at that point. And people are like, all right, you get kind of these camps where one mindset is, you know, I'm all in for Olympic trials and everything. And I was kind of on the other side. I was like, I got to race as much as I can. That's where I learned to get better. And so the more I could race, like I went to the Maria Link in Brazil and Rio in April of 2012, for the same reason. You know, it's a high level competition, but there's less pressure. You know, it's just a good way to race. Pan Am's was the same thing, October of 2011. And it was kind of like the folks from Shanghai that wanted to went, and the ones that didn't want to didn't go. And that afforded, you know, some more spots for some more people. And we joke about it to this day, but like that was one of the coolest trips. So you get the village experience with Pan Am's. It was at altitude. And so like everything is just sort of thrown out, like all bets are off. Like you don't know what's going to happen. Connor Dwyer and I went to, Colorado Springs for like 10 days right before to fly straight there just to try to have some sense of acclimation. Probably helped a little bit. But it was cool because it was a super high level competition, but it was at altitude. You didn't know what to expect. It was in the fall. Everyone's focusing on trials, but I think it really helped me gain more of that experience that I really needed to perform at the highest level. You know, the best way to perform at the highest level is to practice doing it all the time. So
did your entire career fall over Phelps's elite run up?
Say that again.
No. How often were you in the water with Phelps?
We were together every day from 06 to Beijing.
Okay. You were there with him at the sweet spot.
Yeah. The second half of that quad. Yeah.
So questions you should ask national team members.
Oh yeah. Let's do it, baby. all the good stuff.
So my curiosity is, you know, in my day, it was Matt Biondi. Matt Biondi was on the ramp up to 88, and he was going to win 7 gold medals and equal Mark Spitz's, and the media just crushed him. We watched his star blow up. Phelps, whole different universe. How, as a teammate, how do you manage that? How do you have to feel that coming? How do you engage a teammate and live and share the same oxygen as a Michael Phelps?
Yeah, I mean, is a great teammate. Lots of great teammates at Michigan. It was hard. It was a really intense training group, and I know you and Christy Young talked about it. You and Davis talked about it. I mean, the group at that time, don't quote me on it, but roughly, I think between the professional team, guys and girls, and the Michigan swimmers, I think there was either the current and future Olympians. It was at least a dozen. I mean, it may have been a dozen and a half. It was, everybody from Cleat Keller and Eric Vent, who came just as pros to be with us, and Caitlin Sandino, all the way up to Sean Ryan, Michigan guy, collegiate guy who ended up making it in 2016. And everybody in between, me and Tyler Clary and Scott Spann when he was still at Michigan, and all the Pan Am guys that made that team, and then Phelps and those guys too, Peter Vanderkay and Davis Tarwater. There's the group was intense, and so were the coaches. And John and Urbanchak was the voice of, he was the bridge. He was the tie that bound folks together when it was necessary. But I learned a lot in doing that style of training for those years, and basically trying to imitate what guys like Michael were doing. If he was going to do this in the water, I was going to try to do that in the water. And I realized in doing that, there was a lot to be learned by doing that. There was also a lot that I finally understood, even through the London Olympics, rooming with him as an example, that I needed to be my own professional athlete, that there were some great similarities, and then there were some stark differences that I needed to live into and be my own athlete. So it was a great journey. And if you have that as a blueprint, like, that's probably a pretty good place to start. And when you say things like, well, I'm going to do this that Michael does in the water, but I'm not going to do it this way, you're learning and developing as an athlete when you have that nuanced perspective of learning from the greatest athlete of all time. So pretty cool.
That was a follow-up. It's like, how do you pick your roommate on the national team? It sounds like you picked very well.
Yeah, so we did, I guess, just 12 together. I can't remember, but yeah, what we had known, I guess I had known him longer than most guys on the national team at that point, being a post-grad. So just kind of more familiar than anything.
Yeah, you got to respect each other's space, and you got to mind the tension that's happening. And so I would say picking a roommate. I had great roommates. I often roomed with breaststrokers, of all people.
Okay.
And I just, for some reason, we got along. I liked sprinters. I kind of hated breaststrokers. I like to make fun of them, but I always roomed with them because they always end up being my best buddies.
Yeah.
But mostly it was, so I was at World Championships in 1990, and my roommate was Mike Berriman. He went on to be an Olympic champion, but he broke the world record at World Championships in 91. Mm-hmm. And I remember how respectful he was, because he knew that I really wanted to perform, really wanted a world record. And we had like a full 2 days where he was staying out of the room. He wasn't talking about anything. He was just going to get you anything. But picking a roommate matters. And I think it's like it's a certain level of pro and understanding the management of tension and stress.
That's a good point. I think I'm always default the student of the game. And so I think me and Michael rooming together is a good example of, like, you want to sit at the master's feet and learn as much as you can, right? And in 2013, I roomed with Chase Kalish. And so it was kind of the flip-flop. And Chase was still a lot younger, and he was only some of the 400 IM, I think, at that meet. It was the last day. And, I'm several years older than him, out of college at that point. So now I'm kind of like the older guy. And it's easier for me to be the student of the game. And stepping into that role, I think, was part of that exercise of taking complete ownership of the whole thing. I don't need to copy anybody at that point. This is my, fourth year being on the biggest international stages. It's time for, I know what to do. I need to go execute it. And it's okay if I'm an example for somebody else. So, yeah.
You bring up Chase. I love Chase. And of course he was like a little kid when when Michael was swimming, and like Michael, there's stories of him where like he'd go up to Michael's car and spin his spinners, and Michael would come out and trigger his alarm. But and I'm not calling Chase out. I'm not pointing in his direction. But there are certain conversations we have internally with national team members, and the conversation kind of goes like this. And this is really going to upset a whole lot of people. So listen closely.
Oh, good. Let's upset somebody.
If it's sort of like, can you swim meters? Swimming your arch is great. Can you swim meters? If you can't do it in meters, buddy.
Hey, you talk.
Matters.
Ask any 8-year-old little swimmer what their dream is. Going to the Olympic Games. Yeah, the other meets are great, but there is a standard, and that is it.
There's something about a 50-meter pool that just culls the herd, and culls it in a it's a brutal way. So questions you don't ask.
And beautiful. Brutal and beautiful.
Yeah, and beautiful. So some national team members internally might have very stark opinions about, like, yeah, you don't make the call. There's a certain definition that's going there. Is there a hierarchy on the national team? Like I made a national team. I was a kid. I was the youngest guy on the team, and I'm like, I've made it, Team USA. In my head, I was like a superstar, and I just remember the realization that, wow, it's just like any other team. There's a hierarchy. There's some cliques, and so yes, it's a whole new. You're reaching a new environment, but it's the same thing. Everything smells like chlorine. How did you navigate the national team?
Oh, I was kind of a kid in the candy store. Like, I'm kind of oblivious to some of that stuff, and I don't really have a politics hat or anything. But my first big one was 2010 Pan Pacs, and it was in Irvine. So it's kind of a good way to ease into it. Everyone just kind of stayed in Irvine and got to know each other. And I don't know, the groups that I was in, like there was a lot of girls, there was a lot of guys in the training group. So I think it was easy to cross over and get to know a lot of different people. I bonded with certain people for sure. Matt McLean and I, we're always the ones kind of doing something during a training camp somewhere, trying to talk about something other than swimming for a minute. Yeah. What a diplomatic answer that I'm getting to. Lots of great personalities and lots of interesting stories, but it's the truth. It's the truth.
Be honest. Have you been on national team just like, one or two people you're like, I don't like them?
I mean, there's always some weirdos in every group, but that's what makes us interesting. And if you don't see any weirdos, Mel, it's because you're the weirdo. Maybe I was the weirdo.
Maybe we were the weirdos. I saw you cross you got your arms folded. If you guys are listening, he had his arms all folded in front of his chest. He's got all
well, it was very guarded. Yeah.
It's very guarded. So here's the takeaway. Pick your roommates well. Yes, you're going to get on the national team. There's a hierarchy, and some people you're not going to like. It's just a reality.
That's it.
Your life doesn't change. It's the same thing. You're just on a faster team.
That's it. And I will say this, now that you bring up a good point, it's not the athletes so much as it is the coaches. You are so intimidated at first by these coaches. They carry this weight around the pool deck. That's crap. Don't worry about it. The best thing that you can do to diffuse the situation, good example, people that come to mind that do this, Schmitty, Kathleen Hersey did this. Like, you just go and you talk to all these people, especially the coaches, and it totally removes the mythology and the mystique about all these people. They're just focused on their swimmers over here, and these coaches are focused on their swimmers, and you go up and say, hey, how are you? And instead of feeling like, oh, I should know all these people and we only know each other by name and by like the stroke that we swim in the water, it totally diffuses the situation. So that's my advice to new national team members. Just go talk to everyone.
The beauty of the national team, I think, really is that it isn't high school. Like you come in, the best way to get to know people is to go to a table where you don't know someone, sit down, and it's like I would always try to pick a table where I didn't know somebody. I would sit down, break bread, talk to them, even if they were a breaststroker.
Yeah, there you go. That was always at lunch at camp was always a great opportunity. I remember Natalie Coughlin was always really good about doing that. And we kind of just knew hey, how's it going kind of thing. And then she sat down one day and, just sit there shooting the breeze for an hour and a half talking. She's a great friend. And, but that's it. Just sit down and talk to somebody at a new table.
All right, we're under 10 minutes. We're actually down to 8 minutes. We got to go fast. This
All right.
obvious stuff. Did you walk in the opening ceremonies?
I did not.
Yeah. So to explain to people why you don't.
So I kind of, to be honest, I went with the herd on that one. They were like, all right, we don't want to do this and stand around and wait. If I could have done it differently, maybe I would have gone, because what a great experience to have to miss. But I tell you what, this is the story I tell kids all the time. The fireworks at the end of opening ceremonies woke me up out of a sound sleep. We were already asleep. And I'll never forget, the only two people in the suite that actually walked into the living room were me and Michael. And so we're both trying to figure out what's going on. The fireworks are exploding over the village. And we just go out. We're on the 8th floor balcony. And we didn't really say anything for about 5 minutes. And we're just watching our own like kind of private fireworks ceremony. And we can see the stadium in the distance. And the fireworks are exploding right overhead. And it's just a memory I'll never forget. It's pretty cool.
I went to 2 Olympics, didn't walk in either. Basically, the coaches will sit down and they don't want to take this opportunity from you, because parading with your team in the opening ceremony, it's a sacred moment. It's a special moment. However, I think a lot of people, it just comes down to this. Do I want to stand on my legs for 12 hours?
That's it.
And you can't do that before the biggest event of your life. From my experience and what I've heard talking to other peers, 90% of people don't do it.
And that's the thing, like there's so many unknown quantities when you're traveling internationally. This is the part that folks don't see unless you've done it. Mitigating all of those unknowns is such a big thing. And you don't want to do it to the detriment of the experience, because sometimes just clearing your head and going for a walk for a minute is going to help. But it's a good example of one of those things where it's easier just kind of throw up your hands and say, hey, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to avoid the crowds and standing there, or somebody coughing on me, or whatever the thing is, and just watch it from the village.
Personal confession: stress levels for personal confession. Olympic Games always for me the most uncomfortable. I much preferred World Champs. I much preferred Pan Pacific Championships. I much prefer. So personal confession: I wouldn't poop solid for 48 hours before I raced at a big meet. Now, if I was going to a national championships, it'd be kind of, we would be in between solid and just water. But at an international meet, just water, stress. Pepto-Bismol was my go-to. Did stress hit you in your body in a certain place?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was always like hugely hydrated. So I was always doing the other one, meet. But what I figured out over a few years was the first time I got to a certain level of meet, I swam about what I did to qualify to get there. I kind of right around where I had been. And it sort of took me through that once I got past that, I never performed slower. I kind of had that mark where I was super stressed, I was a bundle of nerves. And then the next time I sort of mentally, emotionally broke through. But a good example is 2011 World Championships. I swam the 400 free in prelims. I didn't make it back. Next to Paul Biederman, I think I was like 10th overall or something like that. Didn't make it back for finals. Next to Paul Biederman, current world record holder at the time. And I got out and it was like all the nerves released. And there's a few pictures of me. And there's a clean deck and I'm just vomiting all over the pool deck. And there's like a lot of Chinese people just looking down at this poor like American kid that's just throwing up everywhere.
That's rough. You see people, the stress is so high. You see people react in a lot of different ways. And so not easy. Just something funny, something interesting. At the Olympic Games, you're there with many, many peers, the best athletes from all over the world, male and female. There's a lot of opportunity for romance. Do you romance or do you not romance at the Olympic Games?
There was no athlete romancing to speak of that I encountered. I know you can read articles on ESPN that would suggest differently, but got to meet a lot of really cool people, but didn't connect with any other athletes. Yeah.
The feeling is that it does, what it feels like? This is what the Olympic Village feels like. It feels like, okay, the senior class has graduated out. Now you're the senior and everybody in your clique is basically the same, and everybody has everything in common. And that's very tempting, but you need to stay focused on what you have to do.
That's right. There's
Keep
a task
chill.
at hand.
Keep it chill. And I think this is the case for most elite athletes. Now, I've sort of hogged all our time. We're down to 3 minutes. Do you have any questions that you're thinking, hey, man, this is something you ask national team members?
Gotta ask a national team member, Mel. What would you, in having been to all of these international competitions since you retired, what's the biggest thing that jumps out to you as being the difference from being Mel, the athlete, walking around on the pool deck looking up, versus being Mel, the SwimSwam guy, or Mel, the alum, looking down at the athletes?
2 observations. One, if I walk on deck, nobody cares. I'm Mr. Stewart, the guy who they think the guy who owns SwimSwam, which is misleading because we have 4 other owners. So it's a lot of people don't even know. Some do, but not everyone knows. So that's a little bit of that's an ego check.
Sure.
Another thing is that a lot of older Olympians will say the older you get, the color of your medal matters less and less and less. And I didn't believe it. I'm like, nobody, color your medal matters forever. And that's proven to be prophetic. That's true. You don't care. It really does come down to relationships. But I can tell you this, the older I've gotten, the more you feel joy for what, and appreciation for what you accomplished. Mm. And it feels like when I watch your younger generation, when I watch anybody else, it feels a little bit like going to church and celebrating this wonderful thing we had. So I hope that answers your question. We're down to about a minute.
Down to a minute. All right. I'm on the spot. One more question for you, Mel Stewart, owner, CEO of SwimSwam. Tell me about, coined the phrase post-game purpose. Tell me the best attributes you brought with you and the ones that you had to leave behind moving from Olympian to SwimSwam owner.
I can tell you this, that when it's, as an athlete, it was very individualistic. Swimming's very focused, head down. And what I learned is that in business, you cannot be successful. If it was just me at SwimSwam would not be a success. I just don't have the skill set. I have a lot of blind spots. You need guardrails. I have a lot of dumb ideas, but the understanding that your success is really based in everyone's success was a lesson that it took a while for me to learn. And that's my biggest lesson. Something tells me you might say the same thing.
I would have to agree with you. I like that one. Very cool. Yeah.
All right, buddy, we have to bring you back. Are you going to come back?
If you'll have me.
We will have you.
If you'll have
Charlie
me.
Houchin, Olympic champion. I love you, buddy. And
thanks, man.
We'll see you soon.
You've been listening to the SwimSwam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.